Are you afraid of being misdiagnosed as normal? A fear of autism misdiagnosis, of not being seen, of your autism not being understood, is a really common reason not to seek a formal diagnosis of autism. What if this label, this name, this thing that seems to finally fit and is helping me to pull my life together, what if that's taken away? What if this life-changing experience of validation gets invalidated? Hi everyone, Paul Micallef here from Autism from the Inside. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. So when I personally first started to seriously suspect that I might be autistic, I did three things. I jumped online and found a self-assessment quiz. I looked up a local support group meeting and attended one of those. And then finally, I pulled out the textbook and read everything I possibly could on the subject, which at the time was The Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome by Tony Attwood. And straight away, I was hit by this huge disconnect that I felt between, on the one hand, the acceptance and camaraderie I felt from the support group meeting, and on the other hand, the really cold medical definitions that I was reading in this textbook. On the one hand, I had answers. People really understood. They got me. They understood me at a level that I had never experienced before in my life. And that got me thinking, well, the thing that the people in this group have in common is autism. So that doesn't seem like a coincidence. And yet, on the other hand, I really struggled to identify with the diagnosis criteria. I was reading it thinking, well, sort of, kind of, maybe if you sort of squint a little bit and hold the textbook at a funny angle, I can kind of see how this applies to me a little bit, I guess. But it was nowhere near the instant, immediate emotional feeling of connection that I was getting when I was spending time with other autistic people. But the textbook, the medical literature, it holds a lot of weight in society to have that form of validation. So ultimately, my question was, do I really fit this official criteria? Or a better question would be, would a stranger, would a medical professional meeting me for the first time see that I do meet this criteria? Or would I leave that meeting feeling like they didn't get me, feeling like I tried to explain myself and I wasn't able to express that experience in a way where the other person could actually understand and validate that experience? And one of the reasons that was so triggering is because that was my life experience to date up to that point. I felt like I'd spent my whole life trying to explain myself to others and not being believed. So the concept of submitting myself to a diagnostician who I'd never met and had no idea of their qualifications, or are they even likely to know the latest on autism in adults in my particular case. Am I really going to submit myself through that process for them to have the final say over my identity and my neurology and to give that a label of either yes or no? And that was a really vulnerable process to even consider. So what do? I was positively scared of getting a formal evaluation. But at the same time, that fear, ironically, was driven by a desire for connection and validation and to share my story and for people to understand and accept me. And I guess the fallacy that I had at the time was that I imagined that a formal diagnosis would give me access to those things. I thought that I couldn't call myself autistic. I thought that I couldn't be accepted by other autistic people in the community and to feel that acceptance and belonging if I didn't have a formal diagnosis. I just imagined that that was a standard, mandatory part of the process. And of course, it's easy looking back with hindsight, but now I know that that's absolutely not true. Firstly, as I should have realized with that very, very first meeting of the support group I attended, people were not asking me for a formal diagnosis. They were wanting to get to know me as a person. And that's part of why that group was so healing and validating for me, is that they were actually listening to me and trying to understand me and sharing my experience, rather than me feeling as though I had to justify my experience in some way. And the other phenomenon on the other side is that, unfortunately, people who are not going to believe I'm autistic will still likely not believe I'm autistic, even if I show them a piece of paper. And of course, who actually asks for a piece of paper? I mean, sometimes there are very formal procedures where you do require documentation, and that's legitimate, I guess. But in terms of friends or family or acquaintances or people that I would like to share myself with and to disclose to, they're likely to either believe me or not on my word, and they're likely not going to change their mind significantly one way or another. This is my experience, at least, if I tell them I have a formal diagnosis or not. It's too easy to dismiss, ironically, this formal, hard-fought, hard-won, expensive, difficult, privileged process of going through and getting a formal diagnosis. And then it can so easily just be dismissed. Oh, everyone's getting an autism diagnosis these days. What does that even mean? Like, isn't everyone on the spectrum a little bit? It's so easy to just dismiss all of that by someone who is unwilling to accept my reality of my experience. So if I'd known that at the time, if I'd known that, number one, the people who are going to accept me and validate my experience and understand me are likely to do that anyway, even without a formal diagnosis. And if I'd known that the people who were going to push back against that the most were likely not going to be convinced, even with a formal diagnosis, then that kind of puts a whole different spin on this thing. And maybe I don't need to subject myself to the scrutiny and judgment of another person. Maybe it is okay for me to accept and validate myself that, yes, I actually do feel welcome and included, and I feel a connection to other autistic people that I cannot explain in any other way. Maybe the reason I'm looking for a formal diagnosis in the first place is because I don't trust my own opinion of myself, and I'm always looking for external validation of things because it's my experience in life that I feel like I need to justify myself to others because they don't see me, they don't believe me, they don't see my experience. So maybe if I could just let that go and accept the situation, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. That was a very freeing realization. It meant that instead of waiting 6 months and paying thousands of dollars and going through a big process, it meant that I had access to everything I really wanted right now just by accepting it. And in hindsight, that's what these people at this very, very first Asperger's support group meeting that I went to, that's kind of what they were unconsciously telling me at the time. And I guess there's also another factor that was playing big on my mind at the time, which is that I have come up with a lot of elaborate coping strategies over the years. And those strategies have allowed me to not look autistic. They allow me to do everything that I need to do. And most of the time, what I need to do is pass for normal in a particular situation. And ironically, if I'm too good at pretending to be normal, I might be denied the validation of my internal experience, which is so different from that. So I want to emphasize that this is my experience. So if you're like me and the most important thing to you is acceptance and validation and feeling understood and believed in your life, then in that case, maybe a formal diagnosis may not be a part of that process because, like I said, there are lots of other ways of going about getting those things. But I also want to emphasize at this point that, again, this is my experience. That is what is valuable to me. And for others, I do hear that going through the formal diagnosis process is what they need. It is very validating, especially if it's with a good clinician, someone who can help you to understand yourself and help you to figure out your internal experience, then that can be an extremely positive experience overall. And if you do decide to seek a formal diagnosis for yourself, there are also lots of things you can do in the meantime before that. The first step I always recommend is to go out and meet other autistic people somehow. Whether that's a local support group or an online social space, it's guaranteed to be a fascinating experience. We are such a diverse community that I personally just find it really interesting to meet lots of different people. And invariably, the real gold is that there will inevitably be lots of Me Too moments, like times where you thought, I thought I was the only one to do that. You mean you do that thing as well? No matter what your experience, there will be some others out there who can share that little nugget of experience. And that is the real gold, I find, from my perspective at least. Because it means that you're not alone. It means that there are others out there who will, instead of pushing back and trying to get you to justify your experience, they just say, yeah, I get it. Me too. I've done that thing. I do that thing. I also feel overstimulated in these situations. I also have this quirky little hobby that no one else seems to understand. But now I've finally found someone who can understand me. And so realizing you're not the only one, connecting on that level is just absolutely priceless. So if you're looking for a place to start in terms of meeting other autistic people, you might like to try the Autism from the Inside online social group. You can find us on Facebook, and we have weekly Zoom meetings run by volunteers just like you. So don't be shy, come and say hello. We'd really love to meet you. You absolutely do not need to be autistic or even think you might be to come along. It's open to anyone. When I first went to the support group meeting that I mentioned earlier in the video, I was about 80% sure I was not autistic. Like, I was feeling like an imposter. I was thinking, what am I doing? I shouldn't be here. I'm kind of taking something away from the people here who really have something to share with each other. And this is probably not me. And what am I doing? And all of that doubt, all of that insecurity, it vanished in the first couple of seconds of actually meeting people. When I introduced myself saying I diagnosed myself online yesterday, expecting that to be a joke, their response was, welcome, glad you could be here. You found us. You're home now. Like, I'm feeling even really emotional just saying that, because I did not expect that at all. I thought it was a joke. I thought I wasn't supposed to be there. I thought there was no place for me to belong. And instantly, in the first couple of seconds, they're like, welcome, you're home. You found us. It's great that you're here. So, yeah. Yeah, a little bit emotional, but that's okay. So anyway, I might leave it there. I guess in summary, if you're worried about being misunderstood, there can be a huge amount of stress and anxiety associated with the concept of getting a formal diagnosis. So I would recommend, as a first step, a much easier, quicker, simpler, cheaper first step is to go out and meet other autistic people. So if you resonate with this and finding the autistic community was a really big support for you in your own diagnosis and self-acceptance process, then I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Otherwise, thanks again for watching. I hope you found this valuable, and I will see you again next week.